Hello and welcome in everybody to another edition of the Pens Iceberg. I'm your host, Casey Stamp, alongside my partners as always, Luke Courtwright and Jason Kaczynski. First in, we welcome up Luke Courtwright. How you doing tonight, Luke?
I'm doing great. Of course, another Penguins win.
Another Penguins win over the Boston Bruins, the defending Stanley Cup champions. Final score 5-3. We'll get more into that in just a moment on our game analysis. We welcome in now Jason Kaczynski. How you doing tonight, Jason?
I'm doing great as well. We're T-minus 1 week until the second season begins.
Can't wait for it. Playoffs are certainly going to be interesting, especially after the spectacle we saw at the Consol Arena the other day with Philadelphia. We'll get more into that later as well. We've got a great show for you guys tonight. Starting off, as always, some game analysis. This one will be about the Pens and Bruins. We'll get into a little bit later about some of our best moments of the year, some of our worst moments of the year. We'll do some Pens Iceberg awards. Who do you think is our MVP? You guys can always write us in on Twitter or on Facebook and let us know who your MVP is. We'll discuss ours tonight, and we'll certainly talk about the antics that head coach Peter Laviolette displayed the other night in Pittsburgh, and talk a little bit more about that situation, and we'll finish off, as always, with some game prediction. All right, folks, stay tuned. We've got a great show for you coming up right here on the Pens Iceberg. Welcome back. Tonight, the Pittsburgh Penguins facing the Boston Bruins in the TD Garden in Boston, and you always know going into the TD Garden, you're not going to come out with you're always going to come out with a few bumps and bruises. Of course, we've got some injured players after this one, talking about Matty Niskanen and Steve Sullivan and possibly Joe Vitale. He took a puck off the face kind of late in the game off a Zdeno Chara wrist shot. But in the first period, to get the scoring started at 7:41 of the first, it was Sidney Crosby, his sixth of the year. Man, has he just been on fire since he's come back from those concussions, and absolutely to be expected. I mean, this is the guy that everyone says is the greatest player in the world. Pascal Dupuis gets the assist. I believe that's 15 consecutive games. Pascal Dupuis on his scoring streak. It was, I believe, Steve Mears that said the other day, look out Gretzky. And so Dupuis just been stupendous as of late as well. Chris Letang on the secondary assist. And then at 14:58, a guy that you don't always see chipping in on the score sheet, especially in the goal category, Paul Martin gets his second of the year, assisted by Tyler Kennedy and Chris Letang. Jason, you were on Twitter tonight, and you mentioned that the Pens look a little flat starting out. How are they able to get this rebounded and get into kind of a rhythm?
Well, I think it was a couple of shifts from the fourth line, and we saw them generate a goal as well tonight. Probably over the last two games against the Flyers and tonight against Boston, I think the fourth line's had the most consistency, and they're getting decent minutes because I think Dan Bileswell wants to spread the minutes around and not tax his top players heading down the last week of the regular season here. But they look ready for the playoffs. I mean, they're just cycling well, grinding the other team down in their zone. And Craig Adams, he'll save his goal for the when it counts in the playoffs. But he had a great shot tonight, and Adams was right in front, or Ashram was right in front. Yeah, I like the way it looks, and I'm sure you're going to see, Richard Park in there and Dustin Jeffrey, and kind of get these guys a little bit more playing time heading in the playoffs.
Then later on in the first, it was Benoit Pouliot. Benoit Pouliot was a guy who came over from Montreal and kind of switched sides in that rivalry. I really like this guy. I think this is a guy that maybe at some point the Pens could look into. He's a bigger guy, but he's got a real good release, a real good shot, and he assists to Chris Kelly and Brian Rolston. And Brian Rolston has been fantastic since going to the Bruins. You can tell he's really comfortable in their system, and he has been producing points ever since he's made the move from the island to Boston. In the second period, it was Milan Lucic scoring first, his 25th of the year, assisted by David Krejci and Rich Peverly. And that was just kind of off Chris Letang turnover. Of course, Chris Letang's been back 2 games, played much better late in the game defensively tonight than he did early. It seems like Chris Letang at times, since he's been back in the last 2 games, has been trying to make kind of the pretty play rather than the defensive sound play, and I think that he kind of changed that up a little bit later in the game. And then James Neal in the second period, this was on the power play, his 40th of the year. Absolutely incredible, and I can't say enough about how great James Neal has been this year. I heard 40 goals when he came here. I believe we were saying this last time on the show about some things that we heard about him when he first came over from the Dallas Stars. But, 40 goals was one of the things that I was hearing a lot, and I kind of wrote it off and saying, no, maybe 30, maybe 30, maybe 32, maybe 35 in that range. Certainly I didn't think 40, but wow, he proved me wrong, and he has really stepped it up this year and just been tremendous for the Pens. Assist to Chris Kunitz and once again Sidney Crosby on that one. And then later in the second, also on the power play, Chris Letang with an assist. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Sidney Crosby with an assist from Chris Letang and the secondary assist from Evgeny Malkin. And in the third, it was Aaron Asham, who, at times, Aaron Asham has shown that he has some hands. I mean, he's not just a grinder. He's not just a checker. He's got a little bit of that hockey skill, which is shocking. And Craig Adams and Joe Vitale on the assist here. Let's talk a little bit about Craig Adams and how good he's been lately. It seems like he's kind of saved it for the end of the season. Luke, give us your opinion on how Craig Adams has kind of stepped it up lately.
Well, Craig Adams is one of those guys who he's always going to be in the trenches, really digging in the corners, fight for some face-offs, and just spell the other team. This entire fourth line, their main goal is just to keep the puck at the other end of the ice. They're not always necessarily looking to score a goal. Obviously, they got one here on this particular shift. Aaron Asham just sticking his nose right in front of the net. Craig Adams just throwing it in the direction of his stick. When you get your fourth line really down at the other end of the ice, cycling the puck, just throwing pucks on net, that's really valuable to all your other forwards as well, just because you're tiring those D-men down, keeping them down at the other end of the ice. So great job by the fourth line all around for sure.
I think when Dan Boswell looks out on the ice, sometimes he might see a younger version of, not too much younger, but a younger version of himself in Craig Adams, and he's just an all-around top-notch penalty killer. He's great at keeping the puck in his own zone. He might not have the best shot, but you're not really looking for that out of your fourth line. There's a couple times tonight where he, found a loose puck near the blue line and kept it deep, and that's what you want those guys to do. And he's pretty relentless on the forecheck, and he doesn't hurt you at the other end either. So he's a good guy to have, especially this time of year, and he shows his value definitely on the PK in the playoffs, and usually comes up with a big-time goal somewhere. So we'll see where that'll happen.
And, Craig Adams has been, it's good that he's turned it up at this time of the year. He had a little bit of a rough start to the year. He wasn't really as effective, as he was last year. If I had to give him a grade last year, I would have given him an A+ for what he does. This year, early on, I would have said maybe a D+ or a C, but he's really picked it up late. And hey, you know what? This is the time of the year that it all counts anyways. And we all know that he was a big part of that Stanley Cup run in 2009, and he's certainly a guy that can do so much for you in the way of penalty killing and grinding it out and every once in a while like this. And I believe we had a game early on in the year in Carolina where he got on the score sheet twice, so he certainly doesn't hurt you too much on the offensive end either. The final goal of this game was scored at 8:04 in the third period, even strength with Rich Peverly on... That's his 11th of the year, and Milan Lucic and David Krejci on the assists. So late in the game, the Bruins pulled their goaltender. I think that everyone on the ice was kind of thinking the same thing, trying to get Sidney Crosby the hat trick here, but ultimately the Pens just couldn't kind of keep it out of their zone in that last few minutes. But you hang on for the win, and that's what matters in the long run anyway. So the Pens beat the Boston Bruins 5-3, and this is one of those games that you really want to win to carry some of that momentum into the playoffs. And I think any time a team wins a Stanley Cup, that game is circled on the calendar for the opposing team. And the Penguins wanted to go in and rebound from a tough night in Philly the other night. All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about our best and worst moments of the year, hand out some Pens Iceberg awards, and we'll get a little bit into the Philly game. Also later on in the show, we'll have Tim Stamp joining us to discuss a possible series with the Philadelphia Flyers. So that's all coming up right here on the Pens Iceberg. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back, folks. It's certainly been a crazy season, up and down. More of the concussion issues certainly this year, not just with Sid, but we saw him with Chris Letang as well. He was pretty much concussed at two separate intervals this year, although the second one, they said it wasn't a concussion, but it certainly put him out for a while. So, and it was a hit to the head, so you never really know. But it's, you've had your good, you've had your bad. You had the 6-game losing streak early on in the year, and then you had 7-game win streaks. and 11-game win streaks and heartbreaking losses in overtime with a second to go. Luke, we'll begin with you here. Is there a particular moment in this particular NHL season for the Pens that stuck out to you as maybe your favorite moment or something that you'll remember?
Well, I'm not going to go too far back here. I'm actually going to go maybe surprisingly to a loss. This past game against the Flyers here. We had to talk about it at some point, right?
Absolutely.
I look at this game as a real turning point. The Penguins have had good results here down the stretch. Maybe those Islanders games didn't pan out so well, but they haven't had as much of their there's almost an evil air about them sometimes. Maybe not in our minds, but in the minds of some of the other fans around the NHL. We've seen the transformation of a guy like Matt Cook. Sidney Crosby was not in the lineup for the majority of the season, but now kind of everything's coming together. There's the Crosby attitude is there with you can talk about the Shen cross check there, what part that played in everything that happened on Sunday, but. I looked at this game. We look at this game coming up on Saturday, and what looks to be a playoff series against the Flyers here. This is exactly the type of I don't know if I want to say effort, but the type of malaise that they need to be building here, because the results have been there all season. I don't know if necessarily the aggression's been there. I think Joe Vitale with that hit kind of sparked something, and we're going to see a war in this first round, and I for one am looking forward to it.
I have a laundry list here of the year's best moments. I'm going to try to go through them as quick as I can here. Obviously, the first one is the return to the captain in November 21st against the Islanders. The 5-0 win. He scores right off the bat, a 4-point night, and you could just feel the love in the air. It was just it was a good feeling seeing him on the ice and just being dominant the way he was, and definitely a much welcome return. Obviously, the win streak, the longest in the league this season. I have James Neal's first goal of the season, that way back in October against Vancouver, as one of the kind of key points. I mean, he had a tough end of the season last year coming over from Dallas, and it was definitely a sign of things to come. It was just a little trickler he threw, and it banged off Luongo's skates and went in, and there were 39 more after that one. So I enjoyed the two home wins versus Winnipeg. It was almost like a time machine going back to the 80s and free-flowing hockey, and just really a treat to watch. But I think the biggest thing I'm going to take away from this season is just the dominance showed by Evgeny Malkin. There's a couple things here. The January 15th, his natural hat trick against Tampa when we blew a 3-goal lead, he put the team on his back and just said basically we're not losing this one. 2 nights later, he went top shelf. He takes the puck off of Eric Stahl deep in the offensive zone and just basically goes top shelf on Cam Ward for just a highlight reel goal. There aren't too many guys on the planet that can go that high top shelf just from a foot or two out. The last game that really sticks out for me is the later on against the Lightning, the February 25th, the 5 points in an 8-1 win. His personal war against Dwayne Rolifson. He scores an impossible angle, and then just the full ice rush where he goes through everybody and just a huge wow moment. And those are the ones that really stick out, and just when he was basically put himself as the front runner for the Hart Trophy this year, and just reminded us all what he's capable of.
Absolutely, and some great moments, mentioned there. And Jason, you were actually at the Sidney Crosby return game, November 21st. I can't imagine how that must have been. That must have been just an electric atmosphere. So it was amazing to see that. And I remember where I was when I heard that he was making his return. I was actually, there's so many things I remember of the year, even coming back to the preseason. I remember that there was a game I believe it was against the Blackhawks, where Matt Cook kind of scored this odd goal where he kind of chipped it along from center ice and it went under two sets of people's legs and in the net. So, I mean, it just seems like the season flies by so quick. I remember every one of the preseason games. I remember having to sit and listen on the radio, on the Pens radio. Mike Lang was on that night when the Pens played the Kings over in Kansas City during the preseason, and they didn't have that televised. That was actually one of the good moments for me. It was good to see, and you could even hear over the radio how great the crowd was over there. Tons and tons of Pens fans, and just a great moment to see that city get a little bit of recognition. Hopefully, maybe at some point, a city like that can get a hockey team, or maybe a Seattle or a Portland. I'd like to see one of those cities maybe try it out for a little bit. And there are so many great moments. Certainly, going back to Evgeny Malkin and just the dominance he displayed this year, the natural hat trick in Tampa was such a big deal for me. And, 2 wins I really keyed in on this year that I really wanted more than anything. I hear a lot of people say Philly, and a lot of people wanted the Bruins. Obviously, they're defending Stanley Cup champions. That's going to be a huge deal. I really wanted Tampa. I wanted to beat Tampa in a way that it was a blowout. And we did that a couple times because, man, I can't tell you, I heard it from Tampa fans after that series last year. And it was always, if this, if that, if this, if that. And it's not something you can say if this, if that. We were missing our 2 best players. I wonder how Tampa would have fared had they missed Stamkos and St. Louis. Would they have come out with the same result? Probably not, because we had that series won 3-1, and a big part of how they came back was Stamkos and St. Louis. So Tampa was a real big deal for me. One of the other ones that I really loved was tonight, watching Neil get his 40th, and just so well deserved. The kid works so hard, and he's got such a great work ethic. And certainly, I think my favorite moment of the year was Evgeny Malkin's overtime winner against Washington. I love it. Anytime the Pens can beat the Caps, it's a great moment for me. And that was just, you could hear the electricity in Doc Emmerich voice, and he was very excited. It was just a little chipper, went top shelf. And certainly, I think that was over Vokuna. It was a great win for the Pens, and it's been it's been an amazing year for so many different players, and for the team itself to kind of even, surpass where they were last year, and finally to get somewhat healthy. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen after this game as far as injuries go. Niskanen looked like he got drilled pretty good there, and Sullivan apparently went for some x-rays after the game, and of course, Vitale took the puck off the head. But going into the postseason, hopefully we'll be pretty healthy. Let's get into a little bit of our Pens awards here. Jason, we'll start with you on this one. Not too much of a surprise who maybe the MVP is going to be. Should we assume for you it will be Evgeny Malkin, or is it somebody else for you?
No, it is Evgeny Malkin, but for a while and up until probably about a month ago, it was you could definitely make a good case, and maybe one of you will, for Marc-Andre Fleury. But I just think one thing that sets Malkin apart for me is we talked earlier on the show tonight about James Neal. I mean, on another team or without maybe a Malkin or Crosby, if he's playing with, is he a 30-goal scorer? Does he top out at 35? But there's a lot of chemistry between those two, and Neal leads the league in power play goals, and he's been a great running mate for Gino. And I think Gino likes carrying the load a little bit, and not that his production's really slipped since Sid's been back, but he's been the definition of a most valuable player. He's put his team solidly in the playoffs with the captain being out for a majority of the year, and he's done everything he's asked to do. He's been better in the face-off circle and more confident, and just all-world talent.
I'm actually going to go in a different direction, and it will be none of the people Jason just mentioned. It is Chris Letang. And I'm actually not a big numbers guy, but I'm going to throw some numbers out here. The Penguins' record without Chris Letang in the lineup, they are 18-13. The Penguins with Chris Letang in the lineup, 31-12-6.
Wow.
Chris Letang is a big part of this hockey team. They average half a goal per game more with him in the lineup. Their power play is roughly 1.5% percentage points higher with him in the lineup. Just watching this team without Chris Letang, looking at the power play, look at their back pressure on the rush especially. We've seen that speed he's displayed so much. We saw this team be successful without Sidney Crosby. We've seen this team be successful at times without Yevgeny Malkin. But have we this season really seen this team be successful without Chris Letang? Obviously, they're still well over 500 without him, but you can make the argument that this team isn't who they are without Chris Letang more so than any other player in the lineup. So this season, he hasn't been there the whole year, but I think it's shown that Chris Letang is a huge part of this hockey team, so I would have to argue him as my Penguins MVP.
Boy, for me, it's a tough one because, I want to go with Neil. My heart goes with Neil because, to me, it's the fact that he's proven to everybody just how great of a player he is and how great his shot is, but it's tough to argue against Evgeny Malkin, and that's who I got to go with at the end of the day because, I don't think enough people say that he's the greatest player in the world. And that's my personal opinion. I love Sidney Crosby. I'm so glad he's on this team. I would never want to see him anywhere else. And he's a fantastic captain and a great leader. But to me, and this is just my opinion, Evgeny Malkin, in my opinion, is the greatest player in the game. He just reminds me so much of, and of course, this isn't to say anything about Jágr in the past. This is past Jágr. I'm not trying to trash talk on. Today's Jágr, I would gladly do so. But, Evgeny Malkin just reminds me so much of him. With the puck on his stick, it's on a string. You can't really take the puck. It's hard to take the puck off of Evgeny Malkin, and not just because of how awesome his hands are and comparable to Datsuk, in my opinion, with the hands, but the size. And the only thing I could say that Evgeny Malkin could really ever improve on is his overall speed because he has those big strides. He has the big long legs, and he's kind of tall and kind of lanky, but if he was a little faster, no doubt he could hit 60 a year, in my opinion. If he had the speed of, say, Ovechkin, he has twice the heart that Alex Ovechkin has, and that's why you see that he gets the results that he does, and he's every bit as talented to me, or maybe even more so, as Jaromir Jágr was back when he was playing with Mario Lemieux. So hard to argue against Evgeny Malkin this season. He's just been, I think if you could go back in time and talk to the Washington Capitals and say, hey, who would you pick, Ovechkin or Malkin? I think that there would be no doubt that they would go back and change how they did and pick Malkin. Of course, Ovechkin was great over the start of his career, but he hasn't really lived up to his name and his legacy, certainly in the past 2 seasons. And we're seeing here Washington may miss the playoffs, and that's never a problem the Pens are going to have, even without Sidney Crosby. We would have made the playoffs because of how terrific Malkin is. And I don't think you could say, and you can't say with the Washington Capitals. I mean, they've been without Backstrom almost the entire season, and Ovechkin wasn't able to carry that team without a centerman. So for me, it's got to be Evgeny Malkin, and certainly Fleury deserves an honorable mention for his play early on in the year. Of course, 5 goals against per game in the last 3 isn't going to get it done, but hopefully he can get that turned around because he's going to have to be a huge contributor in the playoffs if we're going to go anywhere, especially if we're going to be playing the Flyers. That is a tenacious team. They're a tough team. And the one thing, look, I'm a Penguins fan through and through, and let me just say this. I detest the Flyers. I really do. As a team, as their players, as their coaches, as their organization, I can't stand that organization the entire way through it. It's just, to me, and it proves it time and time again, really classless. I mean, you look at Peter Laviolette's antics, and that's kind of what we're getting into here at the end of that last game. And during that scrum, he makes a spectacle. He gets up on the bench and he breaks a stick over the boards, Talbot's stick to be exact. And Talbot's words to me, just goes to show how much he switched sides, is that his concern was that his stick was broken and not for the safety of the Pens players, being that the stick went into the bench. Now, that could have just as easily gone into the stands and hurt somebody. It was a spectacle, and he acts like a 6-year-old sometimes, and it's not needed. We saw him actually do that earlier this year with Steve Ott. I mean, there's no reason for it, and especially for an NHL head coach to be acting that way is disgraceful. And certainly we saw the response to the Joe Vitale hit on Daniel Briere. just a couple points here. First off, it's not a sin to put your fourth line out there at the end of the game. Your fourth line's on your roster, is it not? That's a valid line. You could put that out at any time in the game. A game is 60 minutes. So to say that you shouldn't be able to put your fourth line out at any point in the game, to me, just that assertion is ridiculous. And hey, you know what? You could say that, Laviolette and the Flyers are just as guilty. What are you doing putting Briere out there in a 6-4 game in the last minute? Are you trying to run up the score? So you know exactly what you're getting into, too, if you're Laviolette. And the Schenn cross-check on Crosby, that's just a cheap shot. I mean, here you got a guy who's, I live in Los Angeles, so I know how highly touted this guy was out here, and Kings fans loved him, and they were all disappointed when they gave him away. But I'm sorry, if you're going to pull stuff like that, to me, you're a nobody. To me, if that's what you got to do to get in the lineup and make an impact, you're a nobody. So, I mean, Jason, how did you see that cheap shot and what transpired? What are your opinions on that?
Well, I think in general, I think that, and Crosby kind of alluded to in his comments that the Flyers kind of bring out the worst in the Penguins a little bit. There's a lot of stuff that goes on during the game, and Crosby's no angel, and he admits that. But I mean, if there's some slashing going on at a face-off or just coming up the ice, chances are he's not the one who initiates it. But it's clear. I mean, they called it a penalty, and but it was. I think it deserved a little bit more than what he got. It was just the worst part of it for me was Pierre Maguire calling out Schenn's character and saying, what a great character guy this is. And I said, really, this is what you're calling character? A guy who cross-checked somebody from behind.
He plays for the Flyers. That's all you really have to know about that.
Well, that's true. And then you're talking about an organization who's made a living or a name off of the Broad Street Bullies name, and to a certain extent, kind of bastardized hockey in the '70s. So I always loved the one clip on Root Sports where they talk about Rick Tocchet, and for a while, Rick Tocchet he played for the Flyers, and obviously you're not a fan of him when he's playing for them, but they had Bob Clark on and talking, just showing what kind of tremendous courage Tocchet had, and when you sit, they talk about courage, it's basically dirty play, and Hart, all you can say what you want about him, but the organization hasn't changed over 40 years. They're still the same. They rebuilt their team a little bit and remodeled, but it's going to be tough. And I think the thing for the Pens is that I don't think they're going to be able to play their regular style hockey. I think they just have to survive and not get caught up in the extracurricular stuff. But because they're going to get Brzgalov. He didn't have a good night tonight, and he's probably going to be their starter. Bobrovsky's kind of had our number, and it's just basically a matter of winning at home and making it a tougher place for them to play.
What do you think about Laviolette's antics? Do you think that was a deserved fine? Do you think he should have got more? What do you think about the way he acted?
Oh, I think, you can see Granato got $2,500 just basically from standing and basically separating him from the Pens bench, but, Laviolette gets $10,000, and that's, 4 times the amount any player can be fined. I don't know if a suspension is warranted for that, but, a lot of, I think, what the NHL does is kind of a garage league sort of thing. I mean, you have a hit to the head is called a suspension here, and then somebody gets nothing. You're allowed to hit the head, but not target it, and there's a lot of gray area. And but yeah, Laviolette kind of showed his colors, especially with Mike Milbury's comments after the game. He's just a caveman who was a bad hockey. He was a bad hockey player, an even worse coach, and an even worse general manager. And I don't know why really he's the voice of hockey in the U.S., but that's beside the point. But usually Laviolette's been a good guy at the Islanders, and when he coached Carolina, but I don't know, he's got a little too much cheesesteak in him, and he looks like a different guy.
I'm actually a big Peter Laviolette fan, which might shock everybody or not, but I'm kind of okay with everything that went on in this entire situation. I look at Crosby, the way he played, maybe taking some liberties with some guys. That's part of his game. Fans hate him across the league for it, but what are you going to do? It's almost a confidence thing. Like, he needs to feel he can get away with some of this stuff. He plays on the edge, but he's also going to be a guy who's going to work the corners, get to the front of the net, get his nose dirty. He's not an angel. Deal with it, I guess. I look at the way Braden Shen, I think way too much is being made of the cross check there. Braden Shen, 20 years old, I want to say, 21 maybe. At this stage of his career, we heard the NBC guys saying it was a character play or whatever. I think that might be a bit strong. I think he's trying to show that he's an NHL player because, a young guy like that, he really hasn't put up a whole bunch of numbers this year. He's trying to stay in the lineup first and foremost, and really getting under the skin of the Penguins captain and one of the top 2 offensive players on the planet. That's an effective way of making yourself known, getting under the Penguins' skin. I really have a hard time criticizing what Braden Shen did. Give him a penalty, whatever. It doesn't merit a suspension or anything else. But then with the way Laviolette kind of handled the whole situation, it's really, he just kind of had cake on his face. He wasn't ready for anything that happened. Throwing Briere out there, the way the Flyers, they have their offensive players spread out right now, so you can say pretty much any line they throw out there, they're going to have some type of offensive firepower out there. Even a guy like Voracek is playing on their fourth line. So I think it's one of those things where the Penguins had their fourth line out there. In that situation, we talk so much about the Penguins' depth. You throw out any one of those top 3 lines, you're going to have someone out there, whether it be Crosby, Malkin, or Stahl. So you're thinking like that, but if you're Dan Bilesma, you're also thinking, we're playing this team in less than a week once again. With the result of this game pretty much being in hand, they're almost guaranteed to play each other in the playoffs. You have to think long term. You can't stop being physical on their D. It's going to be a long playoff series. We saw Vitali even earlier in that game taking a run. Was it Kubina, I think, or it was Kubina or Grossman, one or the other, taking them out with a really hard check as well. These were clean hits, though. I've seen some people call it dirty. Maybe you can say it's dirty in the fact that it was late in the game, but these teams are going to play each other. This is a very long series. You can say it's best of 7, but you factor in these 2 games here, it's almost best of 9. So you've got to play the long game here. Laviolette, it's like he brought a knife to a gunfight. He didn't have the proper guys out there to handle the situation. The Flyers never even got to Vitali. Englund jumped in there. Asham jumped in there. I think Asham might have gotten carried away a little bit with Ronaldo there. But I just have a hard time really criticizing anybody here. I think this is kind of what hockey's about. This is what the playoffs are going to be like. I enjoyed it. I don't know.
Well, for me, it wasn't as much. I get what you're saying with Braden Shen. Certainly, he needs to make an impact to stay in the lineup. He's not putting up numbers, but this is just my opinion. I don't think a cheap shot on the way back to the bench is the way to do that. Especially not with all the, issues that Sid's had. And it was way, way after the play. And as far as Laviolette goes, I don't have a problem with a coach getting emotional and, trying to get his players charged up, maybe especially to get that little mental edge, going into the playoffs. That's fine. But hey, to grab a stick and break it over the glass, are you kidding me? That could have gone into the stands and hit a fan. And then, what if the blade of that stick would have taken someone's eye out? I mean, there are fans behind that, and that's just childish. It was a dumb, childish move by him. And I actually thought it showed character for Granato to go up and confront him and say, hey, I'm not going to let you talk this way to my players or to my coach. And, hey, if something like that had ever come to blows, I have a hard time thinking Laviolette would have won that. I mean, I know Laviolette certainly has that portfolio as a fighter, but I think I don't know. I give the edge to Canado, especially to Bilesma. We know Bilesma was a big-time physical player. Bilesma actually fought Shanahan a while back. I'm pretty sure he lost that fight convincingly. But hey, it takes some guts to fight Brendan Shanahan. That guy was a tough dude back in the day, and funny to me that he's the player safety guy now. Going back, it's a little bit ironic, and Milbury's comments were just idiotic too. Honestly, there are a couple things I don't understand about this. First of all, Philadelphia as a city, I know a couple people from Philadelphia. One of my best friends is from Philadelphia. He's a good guy, okay? His family, they're all good people. And, I don't understand why these Philadelphia organizations, and it's not just the Flyers. It's the Flyers, it's the Eagles. I don't think there's been any notable problems with the 76ers, but they seem to target players that take cheap shots or are overly controversial. Those are the types of players that these Philadelphia organizations seem to go for. You look at the Eagles, when Michael Vick got out of prison for doing what he did, they were the first person to reach out to him. Now, that's controversial, and that's the type of thing that a Philadelphia team does. And it makes me feel bad because I know that there are really good people in that city. And for their teams to kind of sit there and perpetuate the stereotype that this is a classless city, it's just sad because, why perpetuate a stereotype by making it a true statement? Why not go out and get character guys, that show that they can play the game the right way and not have to throw cheap shots to stay in the lineup? I mean, to me, and as far as Milbury's comments go, I don't think there's a doubt in anyone's mind. The guy's an idiot. I mean, he was just picked up for a child assault a few weeks back. I mean, this guy's he's a moron. He called Dan Bilesma out saying he was wearing a skirt. I actually like Dan Bilesma's response to that comment. He's in kind of a very dry manner. I don't know how many people caught it. I certainly didn't catch it. I was talking about it. Me and my dad watched the video together, and he kind of caught that it was a dry joke. He said, I wasn't wearing a skirt. I was wearing my blue suit. And he kind of said it in a way that he looked like his feelings were hurt over the comments, but it was very dry, and I didn't really pick up that it was sarcasm. And no one kind of laughed in the room, and it kind of forced him to go on and kind of just go through the motions, answering the rest of the questions. But, going back to what Jason said, he was a bad player, bad GM, and he's bad for NBC. And I think NBC, it's another one of those organizations that you really look at them and you just think sometimes, what are they doing? They hire this guy, Mike Milbury, and he just says idiotic things on a day-to-day basis. Even tonight, look at what he was saying about Chris Letang about the Emmy. Well, you should get an Emmy, Mike. Look at the things that you just said about Sidney Crosby. I mean, why don't you go cry some more? You're calling him a crybaby. Why don't you cry about Chris Letang, taking a dive, which is something that every player does. So it's not like nobody on the Bruins has ever taken a dive. So, I mean, whatever, just blow it off. And hey, look, NBC even, Roenick is a player that I respected Roenick as a player, but he even says stupid things from time to time. And again, I certainly respect the things that he did as a player, but he certainly made some questionable comments too. And I think if you could go back to the time that he said how much better Alex Ovechkin was than Sidney Crosby, I think you probably take that back today, seeing how Ovechkin's done over the last couple seasons. But in any case, it's going to be a rough and tumble playoff series. And I actually love the fire that Sidney Crosby displayed in his comments, saying if that's how they want to respond, we're going to play that same way, and it's going to be a tough playoff series. I love it because you look at even what like Brooks Orpik said. He was saying, no, we should just play our game, shouldn't get engaged in that physical stuff and all that. And I like that of all the players, Sidney was the one to come out and say, hey, we're going to take it to you guys physically. We're going to dominate you, and you're going to have to respond to the way we're playing physically, and that's what we need. Honestly, I think that especially, and we saw it in the game against Philly the other day, where sometimes the Pens try a little too hard to make that fancy play, and they don't make those fundamental plays. They don't get enough pucks on net, and they're trying too hard to make the pretty play. And I think getting engaged in some of that physical stuff may actually help them. Taking that physicality to the Flyers and saying, here, respond to us, because we're going to dictate the way the game is played. I think in the end that may work to the Pens' favor. But in any case, it's going to be a good playoff series, and it's been a great season. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to have some game predictions for you. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Pittsburgh Penguins will take on the New York Rangers Thursday night at Consol Energy Center. Just my opinion, but this is one of the games that the Pens really need to win to kind of get that momentum going into the playoffs, because certainly I think that if you can beat the New York Rangers, who, you could maybe argue are the best team in the NHL right now, you could certainly, I think, beat the Flyers. Luke, how do you see this game going, and do you think this is something that they need to kind of carry that momentum?
Well, this is definitely going to be a really interesting game, I think, because we're going to see a lot more of the tinkering with the lines, just trying to get some potential matchups from Dan Bylsma's perspective anyway. Both of these teams pretty much have their spot wrapped up, so from a competitive aspect, they're not looking to kill each other in this game. This isn't going to be the Philly game on Saturday. But actually, Henrik Lundqvist got a little banged up tonight, so it's looking like Baron's actually going to get the start. So that should help. Lundqvist has done a very good job against the Penguins this season. Maybe his goals against doesn't reflect it so much, but he's put some good games together. So I think the Penguins are going to pull this out, though. We'll say 3-1.
I'm not sure what the Rangers' MO is going to be going into this game. With their win over Philly tonight, they've locked up the number one seed in the East. Probably just trying to stay focused for the playoffs. The Pens will try to lock up home ice in the first round against Philly. I like the Pens' chances a little bit better here, even with Crosby back. The last time they played was at MSG, and Sid was playing with Cook and Kennedy. Well, now he turned them into Matt Cook into a near 20-goal scorer, and but he's really looked good with Dupuis and Sullivan. Lots of speed on that line, and it'll be interesting to see how the Rangers D kind of responds to those top two scoring lines. Again, we'll also see what the Pens D has left with Niskanen possibly an injury candidate here. I don't know if they'll call up maybe Simon Dupre, or if Ben Lovejoy's ready to go, try to work some of those guys in the lineup. But I'll like the Pens to win at home and lock up home ice in the first round.
And definitely, it'll be a good test for the Pens defense. Certainly, I think they played a little bit better in the second two periods of tonight's game. A little bit sloppy starting out the first, but they picked it up and they got some good chances, and it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that kind of team defense going into the game against the Rangers. And then Saturday, of course, this is the game that everyone's going to be watching for. The score may actually be a secondary factor to this game. Mostly just going to want to see how things play out after that melee in the last minute of the previous game. We'll be playing the Philadelphia Flyers at 4 p.m. at Consol Energy Center. And, again, score may be secondary. Jason, do you think there will be any type of retaliation or fights or physicality? What do you see going into this game, and who do you think is going to win it?
I don't see anything right off the bat. There's not going to be anything, I don't think, dropped off the face-off. But you never know. I mean, if Bylsma starts his fourth line penciled in, or if Laviolette has to turn his card in first, so we'll see how that goes. But it could be a fine line, because the Pens could have home ice wrapped up by that point, and the game, like you said, the final score may not mean anything. At the same time, while you want to keep all your players healthy and go into the playoffs on a good note, you're going to be playing your playoff opponent in the last game of the season, and you still want to send a message that it's not going to be, Consol Energy Center is going to be a tough place to play. I would expect the Pens to respond in the right way, I'll say that, whether it be with England and Ashton dropping the gloves, or some good clean hits, and maybe just trying to get under the Flyers' skin a little bit, and just setting that up for the first round matchup. I'm not going to really worry about the score right now, but I think the Pens will come out with the moral victory in this one.
I do think Joe Vitale is going to have to answer the bell. I don't think they're going to throw a heavyweight at him necessarily, but they're going to come looking for him, and he's going to have to drop them. And quite honestly, with the type of guy Joe Vitale is, he's going to drop them. I could see multiple fights in this game, not necessarily as retaliation, but I expect a very physical matchup, and things can definitely stem from that. I do think the Penguins, they need to solve the Flyers here in one of these games of Consol sooner or later. So I'm going to go with a hard-fought 3-2 victory. Hopefully we can come out of this one without any injuries.
Well, certainly it's going to be an exciting game, and exciting to see what will happen. Maybe we'll have another little tussle between Malcolm Mania and Scott Hartnell. That was certainly an interesting exchange the first time around, and if you saw Hartnell's tweets afterward, he said, I almost have to give the atomic leg drop to a fan today. But yeah, that'll be another interesting exchange to watch if he sits in the same seat. And certainly he, just like the Pens Knitting Lady, both of those are kind of icons that sit at the Consol Energy Center, kind of trademarks of the Pens crowd, if you will, and certainly we're all excited for that game. All right, folks, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Tim Stamp's going to join us in studio to talk a little bit about the possible series with the Pens and Flyers. It pretty much looks all but certain at this point, but I mean, you never know. The Devils could come back with a few games or something, and you never know. But looking like the Pens and Flyers here, we'll discuss it a little bit. And with that, we'll leave Jason Kaczynski and Luke Court right here. Luke, thanks so much for joining us tonight, and definitely looking forward to the playoffs and looking forward to doing more shows in the playoffs.
All right, I look forward to it.
Jason, thanks for being with us tonight, and we'll see you come playoff time next week.
Always a pleasure, and can't wait for the whiteout.
Absolutely. It's going to be a fantastic series. All right, folks, we'll be right back after this. Welcome back. It's April 5th, and the Pittsburgh Penguins have just defeated the New York Rangers, final score 5-2, and they clinch home ice advantage for the playoffs. And as well, the Flyers defeated the Buffalo Sabres 2-1, so that makes it official. The Penguins and the Flyers will meet in the first round of the 2012 Stanley Cup playoffs. We've got Tim Stamp in studio here to discuss the series and just kind of the last game and the next game against the Flyers and how this is all going to play out. So with that, we welcome in Tim Stamp. How are you doing tonight, Tim?
Good. How are you?
Doing wonderful, especially after the win tonight. And let's go all the way back to the last game with the Pens and Flyers. It was on NBC, obviously caught national attention for what happened in the last minute or so. Let's go back to all the way back to the Braden Shen cross-check on Sidney Crosby. Of course, we saw Crosby kind of going back to the bench after a shift. Now, they said that there was some kind of slash or hack or whack with Crosby on Shen there. I got to say, I didn't see that at all. What I did see was Shen kind of way after the play, I'd say 6 or 7 seconds after the play, as Sid was going back to the bench and had his defenses lowered, it gives him a cross-check right kind of upper back neck area. And then, of course, we see the fourth line come out, and Peter Laviolette takes exception to that. Is that something that you think was necessary? Why would Peter Laviolette take exception to the fourth line coming out? I mean, it's a line on the roster.
Well, I think he felt like it was an intentional thuggery, and I think that he felt like it was an intentional hit on one of his star players, which he didn't appreciate, and I don't think any team would appreciate one of their star players being hit like that. But at the same time, that's the kind of hit that Joe Vitale makes on a regular basis, regardless of what your name is, and that's one of the things that we love about Joe Vitale. So I would expect Joe Vitale to play from whistle to whistle, and that's the way he played. By that same token, Sid did admit after the game that that particular team, they bring the worst out of him. So he admits that he probably did take a couple whacks at Shen. I didn't actually see them. But he's admitted to the fact that he's no saint and that he's done these types of things before, and again that this team brings out the worst in him. So I think it's hockey. It's a rivalry. I think it's something that's it's going to make this even sweeter in the playoffs. But I don't think it's really anything to worry about.
Hey, and you know one thing too, it goes not just for the players. Not only do the players bring out the worst in each other, but the teams bring out the worst in each other, and that's been a long-standing rivalry all the way back since the Penguins were founded, and through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, it's always been one of those rivalries. And of course, then, by that same token, as far as putting out the fourth line goes, you could make that argument against Laviolette that why was he putting Daniel Briere out there in a 6-4 game in the final minute? I mean, what's the point of that? You're trying to run up the score. What do you think of his decision to put Briere out there in the last 60 seconds?
Well, I think it was a bad decision to make, and I think it actually, I think it left a little bit of a bad taste in some of the players' mouths on the Penguins bench. And I might personally not have noticed it, except for the fact that after the game, Sidney Crosby actually made mention of the fact that he was on the ice in the first place. By making a comment. I think his comment was, well, maybe he shouldn't have been out there. So to me, that comment made it obvious that the players, the players on the bench had taken notice of the fact that Briere was there. So I think they did take exception to that.
And of course, then we have Peter Laviolette with his antics, acting like a 6-year-old, breaking a stick over the glass. Now he gets a $10,000 fine for that, so that's hitting the pocket pretty good. That's 4 times the amount that any player is allowed to be charged. So, and I think it's a good fine because you're breaking a stick over the glass. It could have gone so many different ways, and it could have gone badly in so many different ways. I mean, obviously the stick ended up in the Pens bench, but you think about it, it could have flown into the crowd and knocked someone's eye out. So it was just an idiotic thing for him to do, and really kind of not out of character for Peter Laviolette. I mean, we see him get emotional on a game-to-game basis, and we obviously saw that earlier this year with what he did with Steve Ott, trying to pick a fight with Steve Ott. So. But what do you make of his comments calling Dan Bylsma gutless, especially after what he pulled?
Well, I think that sometimes when you don't have enough skill, you have to fight with less intelligence, and I think he's a caveman in some ways. I think he knows he has a team that isn't they're not necessarily gonna out hit us. They're certainly not gonna outskate us. They don't have more skill than we do, so. With that team, it's a pretty one-dimensional, we're going to grind you to death kind of a team. And I think that with him, he has to get any advantage that he can. So I think this is something that makes him look like the captain of his team, the captain of his ship. It gets his team rallied, and it brings them to a new level. It sparks the team to be able to take on what I believe is a much, much more talented and a much higher class team than his team. So I think some of this was just theatrics to kind of pump his own team up and bring them up to the Penguins level.
Well, it was, one of the things that I did like is that Tony Granato kind of stepped in for Bylsma, kind of said, you're not going to talk to my coach like that. And he got on the boards and actually confronted Laviolette, which, of course, afterwards, Mike Milbury had some comments telling Dan Bylsma to take off his skirt. I actually kind of liked Dan Bylsma's response to that. I mentioned it earlier in the show about, he said, I wasn't wearing a blue skirt, I was wearing a blue suit, and it was it's kind of funny that he responded that way. It was very dry. I don't think anyone really caught it, but yeah, I mean, Bylsma acts with such class, which is so different from what Laviolette does, and of course we saw that a little bit with Tortorella tonight doing the same sort of thing, but going into Saturday's game against the Flyers, some would say that the score is kind of going to be a secondary story to what's actually going to maybe transpire on the ice. Do you think that's the case, and do you think the Pens will be able to come out with a win Saturday?
I think it's actually going to be a pretty ugly game. I think it's going to be a game where there's going to be some fights. I think you're going to see Sid getting a lot less ice time. I think you're going to see a lot of our top players getting a lot of time off the ice on Saturday, and I think some of the reasons for that, I think there's going to be some chippiness. There's at that point, we already know who our opponent's going to be. They know who their opponent's going to be. We're going to have home ice locked up, so there's really nothing to play for at that point except for pride. So, I would expect on Saturday that there's going to be some theatrics. I would expect that there's going to be some goonery, and I don't think that's something that they can afford, because to be honest with you, I don't think they really have too many people that are going to be beating Asham or England, but at the same time, it's certainly not something we can afford either, because we can't lose an Asham or an England, especially England.
Well, after the last game on NBC, this rivalry got more national attention, and I think a lot of people, not just Pens and Flyers fans, but people around the NHL now are very, very excited to see this playoff series, and I think you could make the argument that this will probably be the most physical matchup in the entire playoffs. I mean, maybe you could look at Boston and Ottawa and say, that might get a bit chippy at times, but I don't think it's going to be anything close to where the Pens and the Flyers are. What do you think are some keys for the Pens to be able to grind out the Flyers and outskill the Flyers and just generally outplay the Flyers over a 7-game span?
Well, with the Penguins, I believe that there are quite a few keys, but I think the number one thing that they have to do is they have to forget that they're stars. They have to be willing to grind. They have to be willing to get in there and get into the dirty areas. Forget the perfect pass. Forget the perfect play. Put the puck on the net. Grind. Get into the dirty areas. Stand in the crease. Deflect the pucks. It's not rocket science. You're on ice. You're on skates. You're passing a puck. And I think sometimes they overcomplicate what they need to do. And I think in the playoffs especially, the most important thing you can do is to keep your fundamentals in front of you. Keep everything in front of you. Keep your fundamentals strong. And I think if you do that, that's the most important part of it. I think the other part of it is to make their team one-dimensional. Make the Flyers one-dimensional. Put Giroux on an island. And take people like Scott Hartnell off their game. Just hit him enough so that make his ribs sore enough so that he doesn't want to hit you. And take him out of the crease, take him out of the dirty areas, stop him from wanting to grind. And then with Jágr, forget the name on the back of his jersey. Forget the fact that he's a legend. Forget the fact that he's anybody. Give him no respect. Make him use that speed that he no longer possesses. Stay right up on him. That's a problem that I've seen Orpik have over the last couple of months, is he's got terrible gap control. So I think with a guy like Jágr, if you stay right on him and he doesn't have the ability to pass, and you knock Hartnell around enough so that he doesn't want to really get into the dirty areas and stand in the crease, then I think you make this team all Giroux. And I think with Giroux, where he's deficient is he can't hit, he won't go to the dirty areas, and he can't create his own game. So I think those are the big keys to the victory with the Flyers and the Pens.
And I think clearing out the crease, you make a really good point, because Wayne Simmons has 3 goals against the Pens this year, and he's really been somebody who's just been a thorn in our side, and to get him out of the crease would be a really good thing to do, because that's where he gets all of his goals, off of deflections and off of little rebounds and things like that. So Wayne Simmons is certainly going to be key to stopping the Philadelphia Flyers as well. Now in net, we obviously, Ilya Brzgarlov came back the other night, got lit up by the Rangers. It's kind of unexpected. You don't know what you're going to get from Brzgarlov, because he's had stretches in the year where, I mean, he, in his own words, used at the beginning of the year, "I'm lost in the woods. It's like I don't know what I'm doing." And then, he went on this stretch recently where he looked like the Ilya Brzgarlov of old, of the Phoenix days, of the Anaheim days. So you never really know what you're going to get from Ilya Brzgarlov. What would you expect to see? Would you expect to see the Ilya Brzgarlov who's underachieving and not worth his contract? Or do you expect to see the Phoenix Ilya Brzgarlov who's worth every penny?
I'm going to say he's going to be the underachiever. And the reason that I'm going to say that is that this particular goaltender is very cerebral. He's the type of goaltender that doesn't rely as much on his physical skill as he does on his mental strength. And this is a guy that needs all of the poise and all of the confidence that he can possibly muster to stay on a streak, to stay out of a rut. This is the kind of guy that once he gets a little something in his head, he hits the ground face first. So I think with this last loss that he just had, where he got lit up, I think that's going to really, especially since it's one of the last games in the season, I think that's really going to carry over. My hope is that he plays in the last game and gets lit up again. But I think that last loss coming off of an injury, that's certainly going to plague him, I believe, because, again, he's one of those types of guys that once something gets in his head, he really suffers from it.
And, you could make an argument that's good starts are a huge key to the series, too, because if you get a couple goals in the net early, that's going to get in his head. That's going to cause him to give up a lot more and a lot more space and time. Sometimes goaltenders will come too far out of the crease and won't be able to get the right angle. I've seen Ilya Brzgarlov do that time and time again this year. So maybe you get a couple pucks in the net early and you throw him off his game to some degree. And in any case, it's going to be a really good, really physical matchup. Do you think that a physical matchup early on in the playoffs like this could wear the Penguins down in the second and third rounds?
Well, actually, I think you've got two choices. You either play a team like that in the second or third round, or you play them up front. And I think that you're a lot better off playing them when you're fully healthy, and you're a lot better off playing them when they're not fully healthy, and they're not fully healthy right now. And I think you're a lot better, better off playing them when you're still fresh. And I think, the deeper you get into the playoffs, I think the easier you want the opponent to be, obviously. So I think we're facing them at the perfect time of the season. I think we're fully healthy, we're fully manned, and I don't think they are. And I think actually I think this is the best thing that could have happened for the Penguins.
Well, speaking of the brackets that you brought up earlier, one final question for you. Where do you have Philly and Pittsburgh in the brackets? How many games and who's going to win the series?
I have Pittsburgh winning the series 4-2.
Pittsburgh wins the series 4-2. All right, that's going to be it for tonight's show. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a great night and a great week.